Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Global Network.life for our second interview. And I'm really pleased to have Alice Law, a stress and performance coach, all the way from the UK, joining us today. I've known Alice now for about a year and a half, and the work that she does with people and businesses throughout the UK and beyond is phenomenal. So I wanted to invite her on just to share her ideas around stress, maybe share a few techniques, and just have a conversation about, I think, what most people would deem as probably an appropriate subject at the moment. So welcome, Alice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And like you say, I think it's stress for me is always a topic that needs to be addressed. But I think right now it's definitely in a lot of people's minds. So it's coming to the forefront of things. So yeah, it's a good time to do it.
And you join us today with the tail end of potential coronavirus as well.
I do, sorry. So apologies for the occasional cough. It's 3 weeks now, so I'm nearly there. But I just I'll do as well as I can with it.
All right. So look, I've known you for a while, but I actually haven't really gone into too much detail about how you got into this space of stress coach, performance management. So if you can maybe just give us a little bit of your background, what you were doing before, how you've got into this, and what that transition was like.
Yeah, absolutely. So before this, I actually thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. So it was very far removed from what I'm doing now. Did a degree in fashion design, went to go and work for Net-a-Porter for a bit, did all these things like that. And then the reason I got into this was because of my own personal story and journey with stress and loss. So I was a sort of 6-year prolonged period of extreme stress within my family. So my sister got diagnosed with cancer. She became terminally ill and we lost her. And then at the same time as that was going on, my sort of family company went up in smoke, and a life of security and very blessed life just went into sort of pieces. So we had to deal with that. It was losing homes. It was my dad then had depression from my sister, turned to alcohol. I got made redundant from another separate job, and had the normal things going on of relationships breaking up, etc. But it was all just, I basically experienced stress on every factor. So it was like work-related stress, it was family-related stress, it was grief, it was financial, it was environmental, it was romantic. And I just thought to myself, God, I'm really going to have to understand this on a different level, otherwise I'm not going to make it through it, to be quite honest. So I stumbled across at the beginning just all the different teachings that I now put together with, my certificates and things I've done afterwards, which was, mindset coaching and mindfulness teaching and meditation and energy healing and life coaching and, all these different things. And I realized I learned a different way of thinking about stress and managed to shift my perspective so that I learned how to cope in my own way, to be able to calm myself down even when a lot of stressful things are going on around me, and just making myself that sort of like safe, calm space. And I think that's something I try to teach clients now, because as we can see, the outside world is completely out of our control. At any minute, everything can change. And that's something that I don't think enough people are mentally prepared for in this day and age, because in the olden times, everything was so much simpler in terms of, there weren't a million messages coming through a day, a million different pressures. It was all pretty more, food, shelter, work, that kind of thing, family. But now there's so many different factors that can come in at any time. And so what I really try to do with people is to make them mentally resilient to those factors, essentially. So yeah, I then realized I needed to do this for my actual work and job, and did certificates in mindfulness and coaching and various things like that, and meditation, energy healing, and put it all together and just design my own programs. And started working with people one-to-one and in companies. And I do that now, but I'm also actually about to, whilst this time is going on, because we're obviously so online based, design a monthly sort of membership and group online coaching community based around stress for a much more affordable price. So I'm going to see how that manages to get done over this time, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay, just to go back to that period, which sounds like horrific, by the way. Obviously you wouldn't wish that on anybody, but so how old were you again when you went through that period?
So it started when I was 22. So my sister got ill when I was 22, and then it continued sort of on for it continued on really for the decade, but extremely for sort of 6 years. And then I lost my dad to stress-related illness in the end, this last summer. So that for me is why I see stress as such a, it's such a need to actually deal with it, as prevent it as much as cure it, because people tend to take action when stress has become a physical problem instead of at the beginning of it. And so, yeah, losing my dad to stress-related illness has made my sort of mission even more relevant to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And it's a really interesting one with stress. And I know we were chatting just briefly before we went on, is that I think probably firstly, like, there are obviously different kind of stresses that people go through. And I know you deal with individuals outside of a business sense and inside of the business as well. Do you find there are lots of varying degrees of stress between different types of people, or does it all manifest itself as one big thing? I mean, what's your take on that?
I think there's definitely varied degrees of stress, because what it comes down to is your perspective that you've been subjected to in your life. So for some people, for example, right now, they might be extremely stressed at just the change of being at home, whereas someone who's been through an extreme trauma might not be feeling as stressed, because to them, they've experienced something that's changed their perspective in such a different way that they kind of think, well, this isn't actually as stressful for me right now as everyone might be feeling in a different environment. So it is all definitely subjective to your own perspective of what you've had to deal with in your life. So that can manifest in definitely different ways with people. Some people really struggle with, say, the pressure, and some people it will start manifesting more mentally, and other people will start manifesting in terms of fatigue and sleep and bodily problems with, headaches, backaches, all these kind of things, digestive problems. So I think, yeah, it definitely comes out in different ways for people, and that's all based on, their level of perspective around it. And that's completely, out of our control, because you're not going to control what perspective you get in your life, from your actual events, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, obviously, you interviewed me actually not too long ago, and we spoke obviously about my own stresses. And I guess probably a question I've got for you is that, how do you sort of define as an individual, like, or when do you get to the stage where you can admit, actually, you know what, rather than me just keep saying, I'm just really busy, don't worry, I'm on it, that actually, you know what, I'm stressed. Is there generally like trigger points for people where it's just almost like a wake up, or is it just sitting down having 5 minutes with yourself and actually asking yourself some questions? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely sitting down and asking yourself some questions. I mean, the big trigger point, which I try and make people try to not get to, is the burnout point of people suddenly being like, your doctor's telling you, you can't go on like this. And this is the problem, that a lot of people, especially who work in high pressure environments, will let it get onto that stage because they're so used to going at a fast pace, and they think they have to keep going until their body says absolutely not. But I think for people to not get to that stage, it is exactly like what you said. It's about sitting down and asking yourself varied questions. Like, I'll go through with clients, like, if you say, have you been continually stressed for more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Do you find that normal? Do you find not sleeping normal? Do you find having anxiety every day in and out normal? And if they do, then there's there's really something to be dealt with, because the problem with it is that in terms of our bodies, with modern life, our body can't tell the difference between the threat of what we used to see as, say, a lion coming to eat us and us running away. When we get these stresses in life now, like a really stressful email from your boss, or something goes wrong with a deal, and that whole stress response gets turned on, your body, because of the way it doesn't know the difference, it's just been built to react to stress. It won't turn off your stress response unless you actively do so. So people can spend weeks, months, even years in essentially chronic stress, with your body not functioning the way it should do, with wrong hormones going around, with excessive cortisol, with excessive drop in serotonin and dopamine, and all these things that then cause actual physical illnesses. So it really is about actually getting mindful and checking in with yourself, having a reality check about how long you actually have been stressed for, and if it is a normal part of your daily life, because it really shouldn't be, as annoying as that is to say. We really need to sort of change the culture and conversation around that, because I do believe we're all born calm, but it's the world, obviously all these things get added on, and we learn to react in stress. And stressors, so the outside things that are actually causing us stress, they're not going to go away, obviously. I mean, we live in a world where we're seeing that now, we can't control that, but your reaction to it and your response is what we need to be more mindful of and be aware of, to change it, so to turn it off and to calm it down quicker. self-soothe essentially, so it doesn't get too bad.
Dude, I like that. Obviously, looking at this from a business perspective, which I know is, I think, probably where you sort of lean towards, certainly at the start of your journey, is that stress management by the corporation. Do you think corporates and businesses do enough to recognise stress at the moment within their employees, or do you think that's becoming a growing thing?
I think it's becoming a growing thing. I think it is and it isn't. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's some like Magic Circle law firms I speak to, and some of them are like, "Oh, we're just starting this initiative," and I'm like, "You're the second most stressed sector after finance. How are you only just, starting this?" But it is a good start. People are definitely starting to see, to have conversations in companies and banks where there's a head of wellness. I'm like, well, that's incredible in itself, or mental health, head of that. But I think because statistically we know we spend most of our life with the people we work with at work. We spend more time at work than you do at home. It's just the way that, during a working life that pans out. So I think companies do have a responsibility to definitely try to help with mental health more, and hopefully it's definitely on the rise in companies. It's almost becoming trendy, but I don't want it to become trendy. I want it to become a necessity, because it is really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm quite fortunate in the sense that I've got a few businesses that work within our group. So we've got a wealth management firm, which is obviously the higher end of the spectrum when it comes to stress. And then we've got a first aid and wellness company, which kind of balances everything out a little bit. When you go into businesses, and you mentioned that it's becoming more of a trend, so to speak, but what I'm probably more interested in finding out rather than the trend is like, how much of the work that you do and having somebody in there that helps with those stress levels, what's the impact on performance of those businesses? Do you see a dramatic spike? Is it instantaneous? Is it gradual? How does it work?
It's gradual. I mean, the effect on sort of the instant relief people get, I think that's the instant thing of like, oh, okay, right, I can deal with this. I can calm myself down. I can put these techniques into place. And then when they start to put the techniques into place, then it's a gradual thing. But I think the most relevant statistic is really that we are 31% more productive when we're working from a happy and calm headspace than from when we're working from either an unhappy and negative one or a stressed one. So you really have to think to yourself out, if you're a business owner or, running a company, do I want to have employees who are also happy, but also 31% more productive? As opposed to miserable and less productive, just because I'm not providing, say, essentially the necessary mental support that's needed in these sort of industries that cause high stress, or industries in general. So I think that's the one statistic I always come back to, because I think people are always pretty shocked at that. It's like 31% more productive if you're not stressed. And a lot of people think they work better when they are under stress, which is just actually completely untrue. Your concentration levels and all these things get completely knocked out. So I think, that's the one I always come back to, because for me it's just like, ooh, it's a big statistic.
31% more productive when they're not stressed.
Yeah, when they're happy and calm.
Okay. So yoga sessions for the businesses tomorrow, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, there's going to be a mixture of, I guess, staff within a business, and there's going to be people that obviously carry around business-related stress. Boss who's heavy on figures and numbers and wants results, and there's a performance stress that people carry. And I guess there's an element of people that maybe are not overly stressed in work, but they're potentially really stressed at home and bring a lot of that stress into the work, which obviously can be super counterproductive. So for those people that have got that stress at home, how would you sort of suggest or advise them to, I don't know, either leave it outside of the business, or is it something that you just have to bring in and deal with? I mean, what would your advice be to somebody at the moment that's like sat at home, really stressed with either relationships or finances or whatever it may be, kids running around, and then they've got to go to work and they've got to be a top performer? How do people make that mental shift?
I think one really important thing to remember is that, it is very hard for the brain to leave something that's such an emotional trauma. Say if you're really dealing with like losing a loved one, or you're going through a divorce, or you're dealing with something that's really detrimental at home, for your brain and mind to shut that off, because we are such emotional beings, it does affect your performance, as we know. So for that sort of thing and how it gets brought into work, I always advise people to make a space for themselves, even if for just half an hour a day, even if you have to just lock yourself in a bathroom at home because, you know, you have people running around, or even at work for half an hour, just to find yourself for half an hour to work through some of the mind calming routines I give people. So that's, you know, meditation and mindfulness techniques and breathing techniques, and getting all the anxiety out of their head and out on paper, so they're not just rolling it around, all these emotions, and not articulating it and storing it as energy in themselves. Just making yourself half an hour of essentially an outlet for what you're going on with will really help your performance when you're actually at work, because especially in the morning, if we don't have an outlet to get all these thoughts of what's going on at home, of the stress out, then you will spend a lot of time at work not actually concentrating on what you're doing. And although you can't, because I know that from experience of having to go into work, you know, I work for some guys in finance when my sister was ill, and it is very hard to, when something like that is going on, to try and, you know, remove the two. But I didn't have, you know, the outlets that I have now, so to do that. And I found that from experience of working with clients and experience of working after my dad died, for example, that once you do get into giving yourself space with different techniques I can go through more, then you really do give your brain the opportunity to essentially get off overdrive and just compartmentalize a bit more. So then you then can say, when you go into work, okay, even if it's just for half an hour, I'm going to really concentrate on my work. And then I'll bring myself back for 10 minutes to think about this problem, or I'll write down what I need to write down to let it out again. And then I'll put myself back into work again, instead of letting it sort of go like this throughout your day and weave its way through your mind, because that's when your performance really, really struggles.
Yeah, so maybe just about also being conscious of what you're letting into your business day as well. I mean, I know when I've had certain outside struggles, and it's so easy now to kind of somebody to pop up on WhatsApp in the middle of the day and kind of destroy of the afternoon. I mean, is that something that people should be aware of, just to kind of mute those groups or mute the people that you know could potentially have a damaging impact on your day?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same way of, I'll say to people, for example, when you wake up in the morning, don't have your alarm as your phone if you can't. Like, get an old school alarm and put your phone in the kitchen or somewhere else. Or if you don't have an alarm, put your phone on airplane mode and wake yourself up without any of that coming at you. Because if we have what we call like macro stress doses and micro. And macro are the events we just talked about, the life-altering things that, you know, can come out of nowhere and really cause extreme stress. And then micro are the tiny things like you waking up and seeing a news flash in the morning that might be a bit fearful, or, you know, your boss sending you a stressful email that said, you know, have you done this, and blah, blah, blah. And if you have experienced, essentially, if you don't put your phone on airplane mode and the first thing you do is look at your phone, or you allow those kind of things to come into your work, like you were just saying, then you've essentially given yourself about 17 micro stress doses before you've even made your morning cup of tea, which all these little ones add up throughout the day and then continually compact to make even more stress. So it really is about limiting those as much as possible. If you want to, say, really concentrate, you know, on something for an hour, then do just, you know, turn off the groups or put your phone on airplane mode if you can for an hour, and then come back to it, and not continually have your mind going, oh, what's that, or what's that, because you won't be able to perform as well as you want at all.
Yeah, really good point. I mean, I guess on the microdosing at the moment, I guess people are probably overdosing on the microdosing of coronavirus. So on that as a topic, people's stress levels have clearly gone through the roof. And I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be in an environment where a lot of people are looking at the more positives of it, but I'm also very conscious of the fact that there's bad news every day. There's people stressing out all over the UK, Europe, Australia, certainly in the UAE as well. What sort of conversations are you having with people at the moment, and then what advice are you giving to people that maybe are feeling that stress and that anxiety with everything that's going on currently?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very, obviously, the levels of anxiety I'm seeing have really gone through the roof, because we are all in survival mode at the moment. Unless we're doing something about it, we're in that fight or flight response, because the world is essentially in fight or flight response at the moment. And it really is, you know, the conversation I'm having, it's either people are struggling to adapt to working at home because they're not usually working at home and they've got their children running around screaming at the same time and they're really struggling to have that productivity. or it's, you know, the stress of some people are by themselves and are really struggling with the loneliness of isolation and that change and not having an outlet if they do usually live by themselves to then go out in the end of the evening and see friends and have that human connection. So, and obviously, you know, the financial and work pressures, people are worried about all those things, but it really is the sort of things I'm telling people to deal with. It's essentially, well, one of the main things to start doing, which was just the most simple thing, is to not watch the news 8 times a day. Whether you know, whether you need to or not for your job, you know, watch it once a day and get the facts and turn it off, because it's so easy when we're at home to either have it in the background just going on. And what you're essentially doing then is you're flooding your subconscious with negative and fear-based information that, whether you believe it's taking itself on in your body or mind or not, your subconscious will then wire itself to look for the negative and the stress in everything else the rest of the day outside of the news. So you'll become more irritable with, you know, your partner or your children, or you'll become more, you know, concerned about work and all these sorts of things. So really limiting the information that you allow yourself to take in at the moment, I think is a really important thing if people are feeling anxious and stressed. And I'm obviously not saying, you know, don't get the facts. We all need the facts, but if you do put, say, the news on, I mean, BBC, it tells me the same thing 7 times a day, because I just did that as a study for myself to be able to then tell people. I was like, there's not actually any difference from the morning cycle that morning to the evening. So do it once a day. Usually it's not going to change very much. So I think that's just the sort of starting point. But what I'm really advising people to do is, one of the main things is to start meditating. And a lot of people are resistant to that. But I mean, even the Queen was advocating it in her speech the other day, which was funny. But it is because it's so, you know, it's scientifically proven to reduce stress, and it will work. If you do 5 minutes a day, you'll see a difference. You know, no one's telling you to be Buddha on top of a mountain. But there's so many different ways I can talk about that people can put into their day now, even if they don't have quiet, which is
we'll come on to that as a next step. I want to talk to you and ask about what techniques we could potentially do now, or like really quickly for anybody that's on the Zoom. But before we do that, why do you think people are resistant to meditation? Because I started myself about 6-7 months ago, and I absolutely love it. But obviously there's people I've tried to also pull along on the bandwagon, and it's been, no, it's not for me, it's not for me. But where do you think that resistance comes from?
Well, I mean, there's a saying people say about meditation, which I do agree with. The ones that are the most resistant are the ones that need it most. So if you are resistant, then I'd really urge you to, you know, try and almost set it as a task for yourself to be like, you know, it's like that feeling of achieving something when you run a marathon or you're training for something. It's like, okay, well, if I'm really resisting this, I'm going to try and actually make it a set task to do 5 minutes a day. But the resistance comes from 2 things. Is one, that people don't want to look at what's going to come up for them, because some people haven't dealt with their, you know, mental health and their thoughts, and they might have had things that have gone on, and they're not actually, that's why we have these outside distractions. That's why a lot of people are having to go and actually look at what's going on in their minds at the moment, because we are always, in the Western world anyway, on the next, you know, next distraction, next meal out, next trip, next this, next meeting. And you'd be surprised at how many, you know, clients will come to me and just say like, well, I always say meditation is about getting to know your mind. It's not about getting no thoughts to go through your mind, because that's, you know, it's not reality. You can have a thought and let it go by and get into a state where you feel really calm. But it's essentially about getting to know what thoughts are coming up for you continually. What is that fear that's continually being said to you? Or what is that anxious thought that's been continually said to you? And where's that coming from, and why? And how can you deal with that? So it's really about, getting to know your mind. And I think the resistance comes from some people not wanting to get to know what's actually going on in their minds, if that makes sense.
Fair point. Okay, so let's just talk about a couple of techniques, or one technique or 2 or 3 that we can do. Before we start that, for anybody that's actually watching the Zoom right now, if you do have any questions for Alice, just drop me a private message in the chat box, and I'll get you on after we've done these techniques, and you can ask away. So, okay, so techniques. What can we all be doing that just takes a couple of minutes as a reset to just get us in a better frame of mind?
Yeah. So first thing would be diaphragmatic breathing. Because what happens when we're stressed is that we will go into, fight or flight, and we won't be getting oxygen and things to our body, because it thinks it needs to deal with the attack. So really breathing from your, sorry, I can't see, breathing from your diaphragm and not your chest. So if you put one hand on your, top of your stomach or one on your chest, and when you breathe in and take, deep breath in, make sure that your stomach rises before your chest. So if your chest rises before, you're actually still breathing shallowly from your chest and you're not doing anything to calm down your system.
Okay.
So do that for, there's something that you can do, which is 4 counts in, hold for 4, breathe out for 8.
Okay.
And that gets you into a rhythm that's really, really calming and soothing for the nervous.
You want to try that with me now? We'll do
Yeah, sure.
we'll do one quick
if
one.
If I cough, I apologise. So yes, try it with you now. So yeah, if you just want to put one on your chest, one on the top of your stomach, and you can close your eyes as well if it makes you more relaxed. Whatever you want.
I'll keep them open for now.
Okay. So then just take a deep breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, and release. And just as you breathe, just keep breathing out. I can't do it whilst I talk, obviously. You just keep breathing out for 8. And if you can't, actually, some people have a less capacity in their lungs than to breathe out for 8. So bring it back down to 6 if you can't breathe out.
You'd let that run for 8. And does it matter if you take in breaths through the nose, the mouth, or does it not really matter at all?
No, it's the same relaxation in terms of for your body. But if you actually breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth can be more calming. But some people prefer to breathe in through their mouth and out through their mouth.
Okay. So that's one technique you could use, and you do that for what, sort of 4 or 5 minutes?
Breathing? Yeah, just put a timer on your phone and do it for 4 minutes. It's a really helpful thing.
And what are you supposed to be thinking about while you're doing that?
You're breathing.
Just
so
literally
your body.
Nothing but the breathing.
Yeah, just concentrate completely on your breath. So it's a form of mindfulness and getting you into your body space and out of your head space, and just really noticing. If you'll notice you're tight in your chest, just notice and breathe into that space. Don't resist it, and just be really aware of your body and your breathing as it's going on. And get into your body.
Okay, any other techniques?
Another thing you can do, which I might not be able to do with my coughing, is so there's a thing that's called the zebra shakedown. So this
is why people don't do meditation, because of all these weird things. The zebra shakedown.
There's a book called Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, which is written by a doctor all around stress. And what zebras, so shaking is essentially, it's proven scientifically to release the stress response and to bring you back into the normal one in your parasympathetic nervous system that you need to be doing, which is your rest and digest. So your non-stress response. And shaking, the reason they say it's zebra shakedown is because zebras do it after they run away from a lion, because they've gone through such extreme stress. You'll see them shake to get them back into a normal system. So if you are feeling really anxious and really stressed in that way that you can't feel calm and sit still, and you're a bit sort of like, jittery almost with stress, then I would say definitely do a shake, because it'll tell your body to calm down. So I will look very silly doing this now, but you can basically essentially just start with your wrists and then work your way down your body like that, and then eventually do with your head as well, and just get really vigorous with it as much as you want to with your own capacity. But if you do that for about 3 or 4 minutes as well, you'll really notice the effect in your body with anxiety. Sorry. And then the other thing I would say, which you can't do now, but is definitely to try and get people to do a morning routine at this time. So, thank you. So I would say if you start with, if you have 10 minutes in the morning, then do the minimum. If you have half an hour, because you're lucky enough to, either live by yourself right now, or you don't have lots of people demanding your attention in your isolation, then give yourself half an hour in the morning, because you'll just notice the difference so much, especially at this time. If you give yourself that space for your mind in the morning, you'll really notice yourself looking for the positive for the rest of the day and more calming. So what you can do is a morning routine. I do this with clients a normal day, every day anyway, but I do it every day. So it just, it comes up with a ritual. And, what you do is, you make a habit for 21 days, and then you actually stick with it after 28, it becomes a part of your life. And this really has become a part of my life and a part of, lots of different practitioners' lives and their clients, because it just is so proven to work, a morning routine. So what you can do is the airplane mode thing, like I told you already. So just make sure that you're not looking at your phone until you've completed this. So, you know, get up, have a stretch. So get the body moving a bit, just stretch in a gentle way. Make yourself a nice drink, you know, coffee or whatever you like in the morning. And then just, if you don't have one, you know, a notebook or a journal. I mean, you can still order them on Amazon at the moment. It's one of the few things that's still in stock. But you can, sit down with your journal and essentially do a mind dump in the morning. So get everything that you're worrying about or, you know, concerned about out of your head and down onto paper. So it's part of therapeutic writing. And so, you call it a mind dump because it's not going around up here and it's on paper, and you can just sort of streamline it and actually see, okay, that's out on my head. I can see what I've been thinking. That's helped me have a little bit of relief. So get all that out. So you can also, if you find it hard to just free flow, you can ask yourself the question at the beginning, you know, how am I feeling today, or what's on my mind today, or how do I want to feel today? So start with that question. Then move on to gratitude. Because as annoying as that buzzword is, you know, and people it gets thrown around a lot. It's, you know, you must be grateful. But the reason is because gratitude and kindness are really aligned in the physiology it gives the body. When people are grateful, they're kind to someone else. And that physiology is the opposite response in your body to stress. So it's the opposite response in your body, but it's also, it helps your mind. If you look at gratitude in the morning or before you go to bed as well, for the things that you're grateful for, and it can be the tiniest things. I'm grateful for my cup of coffee today. That works with your brain. You know, I'm grateful for being healthy today, all these little things. You then train your mind as subconscious to look for more to be grateful for throughout the day. So you end up programming your brain to have a more positive experience. So, you know, you can start by just writing 5 down a morning, or if you have loads to say, then feel free and write a whole page, but 5 is a good starting point for people. And then I always say meditate, even if you're just doing 5 minutes of the breathing we just talked about. That's a form of meditation. It's a form of mindfulness. Or meditate with, you know, one of the apps like Happy Not Perfect's a great app, or Headspace, Calm, or, you know, you can get a YouTube video up with different things. I love meditating just with music because it's just, you know, nice to get into your own zone, but just finding something that's works for you just for 5 minutes or more. And then go on to setting an intention or a positive affirmation. So at the moment, I think an affirmation for people that is really helpful is just, I'm calm and all is well, because a lot of people are worrying about, you know, what's going on around them, and what you have to bring yourself back to. And your affirmation is yourself and how you actually want to feel, because everything's out of control at the moment on the outside world. So just coming back to that and writing that a statement down. Always follow I am with what you want. So affirmations work their most strongest for your subconscious after I am. So write your affirmation down 3 times, repeat it out loud if you can. And the most effective thing, as uncomfortable as it sounds, is to repeat it out loud in the mirror at yourself. It gets into your subconscious even more. And then what I would finish with people at the moment, which I think anyone can do, no matter how busy your household, is to put on a really great, happy, high vibration song and dance around and move your body and get yourself into that positive energy at the end of it. So that would be a little routine for people to do at the moment, which I would say do anyway, so to try it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to try all of that tomorrow for 21 days. Is there anywhere that people can go to actually get these tips from you, or can you email the people for me to then send out to my network, or is there a website that people can go to see this for you?
Yeah, those tips aren't on my website. There's different things on there. I mean, my social media has tips on, but I can send this specific routine to you.
Yeah, if you can do that'd be great. Send it through to me. I'll send it to everybody. And also, you've got your podcast as well. So presumably that must contain some degree of tips and tricks. And I know you've interviewed quite a few good people on there as well. And that's Lawali Life.
Yeah, exactly. Lawali Life. It's my name backwards, so it's about seeing things from a different perspective. So, yeah, it's the podcast is, as you know, it was very kind of you to come on. It's all different conversations with different leaders in their fields about stress and loss. So the greatest stresses and losses they've had to deal with and how they overcame them, and then me giving different tips and influence in the same topics. So I have a very wide spectrum of people, and there's definitely some great advice that people have given in there. So it's worth listening to, because I find them very uplifting people I put on there, so to speak.
Yeah, some really good interviews on there, actually. I've been through them, really good. Okay, so I want to we've got about 5-10 minutes left. I want just to invite a couple of questions in. So I'm going to do this more of a live. So Darren Hooker, I know, is on the Zoom. So he's got a question. So Darren, if you want to pop yourself off mute, don't be shy and open your video unless you're sat there in your pants. And ask Alice whatever question that you've got.
Hi Ali, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I just wanted to know, so I've got a friend back in the UK that I know has been going through a tough time, and I've kept in touch with him, and we've done a couple of sort of Skypes and stuff. But I'm just very conscious that sometimes when we keep asking people, are you okay, it can kind of drive them away or drive them mad or both. So are there any sort of strategies that you could maybe suggest where you can try and get people to open up, but not get to that point where you just feel like you're in their face all the time and getting on their nerves?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One thing I will say is that the sad truth about the the human way is that we won't open up until we are ready. But one thing you can do is the method of ask twice. So particularly with men, you find that if you ask, are you okay? They'll say, yeah, fine. And that's, end of conversation. So something that people has, it's been psychologically proven to work more to get people to open up if they're going to, is to just then say that next question of just, are you sure you're all right? Is there nothing you want to, talk to me about in that moment? If they are willing to open up, then, then they can. But I think one great thing to, get people to start to do is to listen to, I can send, depending on what sort of struggle he's going through, I can send some advice on different like podcasts or listenings to listen to, because I think they really help as a sort of comforting outlet for people to feel like they're not alone in the scenario when other people are talking about it. And then they're more prone to opening up to their closest, nearest and dearest. Because it's all about isolation, those kind of things. When someone is going through a hard time, you feel so isolated, you feel like you're the only person who could possibly be going through that and no one might understand. So it's, studies do show that if you subject people to things to listen to that prove that other people understand exactly how they're feeling in some way, then they'll be more likely to open up to their friends. So that was the sort of advice I give them, that, if that's any help at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question, Darren. Alice, it doesn't look like there's any more questions come through. I've got a million of my own. But
I'm sorry, Julie said in the writing, but she said, oh, not to do. Yeah, no, it's a good question, Julie. So yeah, with the writing, you can do your mind dump of just everything of your concerns out, and then do your to-do list, after you've done your morning routine. So try to separate the two. So try to deal with your emotional, your mental sort of concerns, and then deal with the actual what needs to be done. You're welcome.
Yeah, so like I said, I've got probably another million questions I could probably ask you, but we've only got another couple of minutes left as well. It's been absolutely awesome having you on, and you're such a calm person to always talk to. So I'm going to put, I think, some of these to-do lists and the stuff that you've gone through on the site so people can go on there and find it for themselves. I'll drop an email to everyone on this call as well with your contact details if they want to get in touch. But yeah, just thank you so much for your insights. It's been really, really good to have you on. For those of you that are watching or listening, this will be made available on the YouTube channel. It'll be made available on the website, and it will also be made available as a podcast as well. So whatever it is you're doing this week, please try and stay safe and have a fantastic week ahead. Alice, thank you again.
No, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope you all got something out of it, and yeah, stay safe and speak soon. Thanks, Greg.
Catch you later. Cheers, Alice.